Another episode of How Church Works, and today we're going to talk about corporate Christian culture. The real question is, do we start with the corporate or do we start with the personal? We are meant to be in community. This is very important. But we also know that we are meant to have a personal relationship with Jesus. It's not a question of either or, but it is a question of which comes first. Which leads the way? Is it that we are meant to start in the corporate environment and then out of that we will go into the personal? Or are we meant to start with the personal and out of that the corporate will develop? Did Jesus start with the corporate and try to work to the personal? Or did he advocate and practice starting with the personal and then out of that forming the corporate or the group? He had a lot of disciples, and there were a lot of different levels of relationship that he had with all of those, right? So Jesus was practicing the balance between relationship with the individual and relationship with groups. But where did Jesus focus most of his time? It was on the 12. And how did he focus most of his time with the 12? It was one-on-one personal. Jesus spent most of his time developing one-on-one personal relationships with a group of 12 guys. This is John chapter 10, starting with verse 3. He calls himself the Good Shepherd, and then he says, "The watchman opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice." Guys, it's not just a metaphor, not just a pretty picture. Jesus is saying, my sheep, my disciples really know me so intimately that they know the difference between me and someone else. Now, of course, Jesus is speaking at a time when he was physically present with his disciples. Guys, does that change anything for us? We can know Jesus intimately. How? In the Gospel of John, it's clear. If you read John 14 through 16 especially, Jesus said, "I'm going away, but I'm sending the helper. It's good that I go away because then you will have this helper, the paraclete, the advocate, the Holy Spirit, who will be in you. It'll be way better than me being physically present. I will be in you spiritually. I will be able to be even closer with you personally, intimately, because of this new helper spirit that's coming." What does it mean to hear Jesus' voice? It actually practically really means that we are able to discern the Holy Spirit moving within us, the Holy Spirit speaking. Jesus said, "For those who have ears to hear, let them hear what the Spirit says." That's how John put it in Revelation, but Jesus said all the time, "For those who have ears to hear," right? There is a way that we can really be intimate with Jesus, that we can know his voice intimately. He makes this interesting statement. He's talking about the hired hands and the gatekeepers. These are the leaders of churches. In this metaphor, there's a pen, and the hired hand keeps them in the pen, keeps them safe until the shepherd comes and leads them out. So in this parable metaphor, Jesus is saying, yeah, we need to have this corporate space, and there needs to be like spiritual elders over my people, but ultimately I should be able to come to them and lead them out of that space throughout the whole world, because they hear my voice and they know what to do. They can follow me anywhere. It doesn't matter the environment that they're in. They don't have to be in a safe environment and avoid the dangerous environments, because I am with them and they know my voice and they won't listen to a stranger. And so they don't need to worry about being out in the world as long as they hear my voice and know my voice and know me personally through the Spirit. That's what he's saying. Again and again, we see that the personal formation comes first, and out of that, the corporate will be good and healthy. But when you try to form the corporate first and out of that develop the personal, doesn't work that well. Often in churches, what you find is that people are coming to the corporate things, the group things, getting the group teaching and the group Bible studies and the group fun activities. But beyond that, they feel like the personal is optional. Why? Well, because in essence, whether we've said it specifically, we've actually really modeled the fact that as long as you're doing the corporate Christian thing, that's what really matters. And if the personal isn't so much in your life, well, at least you're doing the corporate, and at least that is the baseline. No, not the baseline, not the first, not the second. It's not what leads the way. When you push the corporate as leading the way, you don't get to the personal. You often create obstacles to the personal because you've really told people, well, you're giving your money to this group of people, and as a group we're doing these good things and those good things, and you personally may not be doing any of those things, but you're spending your time here, you're giving your money, and you are equaling to a corporate action and a corporate activity and corporate teaching and corporate exercise and corporate practices and corporate good deeds that really you're not doing personally, but your church is doing it. So really it's like you're doing them, and that's really all that matters to God. And I can tell you, no, it is not what matters to God. One more passage. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 14. Then we will no longer be infants tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of men in their deceitful scheming. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will in all things grow up into him who is the head, that is Christ, from whom the body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. How do we grow into maturity? Each part must mature individually. And then when you add all those mature, developed parts together in a body, the body itself corporately will be good. But when you start with the corporate and you try to get people involved in corporate activities and corporate works, but they don't have the internal, personal, spiritual development, what you have is an empty shell of Christianity, an empty shell of church. People doing good works, people trained in rote surface thinking, rote service activities. They're habituated in the action of Christianity and the surface representation of Christianity, but they have nothing of the real depth of Christianity. That's why Jesus says in John, I am the vine, you are the branches, abide in me and I in you, and you will bear much fruit, but apart from me you can do nothing. Jesus says explicitly in that passage, you need to first be abiding in me like a limb is grafted into a plant so that you are fed by the nutrients of the main plant. And when you do that, you will bear much fruit because apart from me, you can't do a thing. And so if we are trying to do good works, but we haven't developed the internal spirit connection, relationship with Christ through the Holy Spirit, what are we doing? When you put the corporate first and hope that somehow eventually you'll get to the personal, it ruins both. You don't get both. You don't get a good corporate group, a good corporate culture, and you don't get personal growth either. That's why discipleship isn't really happening, guys, because the church is stuck in this mindset. Well, we're getting the group together and they'll just kind of catch the flavor of what they need to do personally. And when they go home, they'll do all this stuff. And, well, who's modeling it? Hearing the pastor talk about his Christian life from the stage, well, that's setting a tone. It's putting an example, but it's not showing people how to do it. And so when they leave the corporate, they don't know how to do it personally. And that's where the rubber really meets the road. And that's where we really bear fruit in our personal lives as we interact outside of that group. Whatever we do, we're going to work, driving down the road, going to the grocery store, at home with our family, with how we treat our wife, how we treat our husband, how we treat our kids, how we treat our parents. It's like everything actually is personal, guys. There is no corporate to your life. Like you're in corporate spaces, but you are always an individual interacting personally with other people. In some ways, the corporate group is a superficiality or a superimposed construct. We're all individuals interacting personally with a very personal world, right? And so to try to take a corporate approach towards church as the foundation and as the starting point, you thwart and you contort and you ruin the whole thing. You cannot start with the corporate and get to the personal. Doesn't work. It's not working. That's why the church is where it is. When you stand before God, guys, He's not going to ask you, what did your church do for me? And how did your church know me? He's going to ask you, how did you know me? And what did you do out of your relationship with me? And if your answer is, well, I had a relationship with a group of people, and that was it, right? He's going to say, no, that's not it. You were supposed to have a personal relationship with me, and out of that, you were supposed to live a personal life with me as I lead through the world. And if your answer is, well, I really didn't understand that I was supposed to have the personal, and that the personal was the premier and central, what's he going to say? I never knew you? Oh, baby. Woo! I hope not. He might say, tested by fire, works are burned up, but you'll escape as one escaping through the fire with their soul. I don't know. I can't say, I don't sit in that seat of judgment, but I can tell you guys, that's how it's going to be. He's going to ask you if you knew him personally and what you did out of that personal relationship to reflect that personal relationship in your interactions with others in the personal aspects of your life. The corporate ain't going to cut it. And the church needs to turn itself 180 degrees around from the idea that as long as you're engaged in the corporate, you're fine. And everything else is secondary. Absolutely backwards. It's the personal that founds us, grounds us, and gets us going. And then the corporate will be good when the personal is good. But it does not work the other way around. We need to get that turned the other way around because the church isn't really practicing that truth.
Some of you right here know what I'm talking about. So what you pay to come in for? Well, I always drove by here and it was crowded and I wanted to come in and see what was happening. Got a couple of tickets to see it. So you just walk right on in? So I don't blame you. I used to go to clubs like that. Call up the time and stick you know, take out the food. A lot of people come to the door, but ain't nobody hardly here. I said, damn, some of you right here know what I'm talking about.